Okay, the big myth, of course, has always been this so-called chemical weapons thing. To be honest with you, I hardly spend any time on that. It's so stupid. It's literally like, okay, the United States has accused the Syrian government of shooting itself in the head again to make sure that they can never be victorious in this war. It's literally that juvenile. For example, the first chemical weapons attack in the big one that everybody was talking about in Ghouta, I had been watching every day Dr. Jafari, the Syrian UN rep, working with the Syrian government, working with the United Nations, trying to get an unbiased team of investigators into Syria to investigate the use of chemical weapons there. Over a year. Now we're expected to believe that finally after a year, there's finally a team, they go into Damascus, they're literally unpacking their bags in Damascus. And President Assad just simply cannot control himself and lets a sarin attack fly against women and children in Damascus conveniently so that it could be investigated by this UN team. It's crazy. It's like a 4-year-old's plan. We know that the terrorists have sarin. The track of sarin was traced down through Turkey to those groups by Seymour Hersh in an article called Who's Sarin? In fact, the CIA trained these so-called rebels in the use of chemical weapons in Jordan. I have an article from CNN. And in fact, the United States of America Foreign Policy just sent out an article not too long ago. CIA documents prove the United States of America helped Saddam Hussein launch some of the worst chemical weapons attacks in history against Iran. None of this is about chemical weapons, people. It has nothing to do with the price of tea in China, as my father used to say. In fact, most of the time, it appears that these are just really false flags. And people say, haven't you seen the video? Of course it happened. We saw the video. Have you ever seen a movie? Sometimes movies are documentaries, and sometimes they're fiction. And you can't usually sometimes tell the difference. Now, about this latest routine, about this Khan Sheikhoun attack, I was in Syria at the time, and then after this news of this supposed new chemical weapons attack in Idlib went off, Donald Trump decided to launch 59 Tomahawk missiles against the Sharet air base near Homs. And I was 10 kilometers away. And this is my hotel room. The night before, we'd had a great old night. You know, we always hang around and people are playing music and doing cards and stuff. I went to bed, I had my window wide open, and I slept like a baby. I didn't hear a thing. And I woke up in the morning, I always check the news when I'm there, of course, and found out my country had just launched a major missile attack against Syria. And so I went downstairs, and all the people there are like comforting me because I was so shaken. I was like, I couldn't believe that they would do this. It's really hard because it's sad that for every one of those Tomahawk missiles that cost $1.2 million, killed the uncle of a dear friend of mine who was a colonel at that base. We could have built a school in Syria, and we would have had allies for generations. Regarding the Khan Sheikhoun attack, what you have is Idlib is controlled basically by Al-Qaeda and a whole bunch of different terrorist groups, but Al-Qaeda is the strongest one. If you've heard of the White Helmets, they're Al-Qaeda's personal emergency management team. That is what they are. They're not great civil defenders. They aren't the rescuers of children. They're the personal EMTs of terrorists. They act like this hole in the ground has been this big chemical weapons bomb that's gone off, and you see them, you know, getting samples. The people getting samples are terrorists. They support terrorists. Then they ship them to Turkey. Turkey, which has been ISIS' greatest supporter since 2011, has let in almost 100,000 terrorists over its borders to go into Syria to fight for ISIS. Says, oh yes, we certify that this is sarin. So we've gotten samples from terrorists that have gone through terrorist supporter hands, and no time was there ever an investigator on the ground there, ever. In fact, in the UN report, on the first page, it says, there's no way an investigator's going there. It's all terrorists. That's basically what they're saying here. When they said the terrorists filled the hole with concrete, so it's going to be hard to do an investigation anyway. But what do you hear on the news? UN says President Assad responsible for a chemical weapons attack. It's crazy. This is the article I was mentioning by Seymour Hersh, who's sarin. He's written some brilliant articles about Syria. Early on in 2003, you know, there was an article in Washington Times that it was these so-called rebels doing these chemical weapons attacks. I read an article in the India Times, I think it was, and they said, all around the world, chlorine gas attacks are a signature of ISIS. Except in Syria, when apparently they're the signature of the Syrian Arab Army. What I'm trying to say is it's a constant frame job. The Syrian army has done a lot of damage in Syria. Nobody's debating that. They're fighting 100,000, 200,000 terrorists from over 100 other countries that are trying to tear their country apart. It's brutal warfare. It's street-to-street fighting. But they're not going around killing women and children with freaking sarin gas. It's not happening.